The two big stories that we need to discuss with you, the first being James Comey, the IG report on James Comey. He actually is responsible for an entire IG report on him that found that he acted outside the boundaries of the DOJ and the FBI rules. They also claim that the memos that he says were personal ones were not personal documents, that they were government documents, and on, yet he escapes prosecution under the Trump administration. How does this happen?
Well, any prosecution or attempted prosecution of James Comey for the leaking of those memos would have been extremely difficult. And it was a very wise decision by Bill Barr not to pursue criminal charges in this particular matter, the leaking of the memos. Let's remember one thing also that the Washington Post got wrong. They said that there was no classified information leaked. That is false. When James Comey turned over one of the memos to his private attorney, who was not authorized to receive classified information, that memo was classified, and that was an illegal leak. It was an illegal disclosure of classified information. It was a mishandling of classified information under the espionage statutes, and of course he mishandled all of the memos because they were not his personal property. They were government memos. I mean, his claim that they were his diary is ludicrous. Even if you do have a diary when you're in public service, if you do it on government time, it belongs to the government. At any rate, pretty embarrassing, but nothing embarrasses James Comey. The level of ignominious behavior that he is engaged in just completes to get bigger and bigger. So this is the second report on Comey. Remember, the first report was about how he mishandled the Hillary investigation and illegally exonerated her. This is now the mishandling of FBI information. And the third one that's coming on Mr. Jimmy is going to be the FISA warrant application IG report, which will be out in September or October. By the way, remember, we discussed here on WMAL that there was going to be a separate report on James Comey. No one else did that, but we've had pretty good information.
Yeah, I'll always love getting that good information. James Comey, who you talked about, is defiant. Of course, he tweeted out after the report came out that he wants a public apology from those who defamed him. Also said that those who've spent 2 years talking about me going to jail or being a liar and a leaker, ask yourselves why you still trust people who gave you bad info for so long, including the president. He's totally defiant.
Well, what you have he's adopting the old Democratic strategy that when you're cornered, you lash out and you accuse the party who's doing the investigating of being wrong, incompetent, politically motivated, corrupt. Jim Comey's very, very good at that. The problem for Comey is that nobody believes him. If he hadn't ruined Hillary Clinton's campaign by his famous reinvestigation of her in October of 2016, it might be a different story. But even his exoneration of her was basically a body blow to her campaign, and he is generally believed by the people inside her campaign to be the reason she lost, not the phony Russian collusion theory, which they use to make themselves look better. But I think Comey will go down in history, there's now just no doubt about it, as the worst FBI director in history. I thought it was interesting that the former IG of the intelligence community described his conduct as unbecoming. It was understated, but very, very apt. That's the least that you can say about Comey at this point. Whether or not he will ever be prosecuted for any of the things he did, we shall see just how bad the FISA warrant application process is described by Horowitz. It's pretty bad from what we know. It's pretty clear that people, including high-level Justice Department officials, lied to the FISA court repeatedly over a number of years.
Now, Joe, but to Mary's first question, though, this idea that why didn't any of this cross the threshold for him to be prosecuted, I mean, isn't it the case, did you find any evidence in this that James Comey perhaps lied to Congress in a way that overstepped what even Michael Cohen did by misstating the date at which a conversation ended on a sale of a Trump Tower Moscow?
I don't think there's any doubt that Comey lied to Congress multiple times, just like Clapper did and just like Brennan did. The question is whether or not you can make a case. As a prosecutor, the thing that you do is you have to realize who the defendant is, what the evidence is, what your forum is. Remember, these cases would all be brought, for the most part, in the District of Columbia. You could probably get some of these cases in the Eastern District of Virginia, but venue is always a complicated question. The issue is, what's the District of Columbia jury going to do? Now, in my view, I'd put them through the hoops. I wouldn't care whether I won or lost, as long as I had the ethical conclusion that I had guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I would try whatever case I had. I think in the case of the memos, the leaking of the memos to his attorney in the New York Times through his attorney, I think that was not a prosecutable case, either on the facts or the law. I don't think it was a wise case to bring as a first criminal case against one of the senior co-conspirators. By the way, I had a journalist that I spoke to over the weekend by email who had called my comments about the ongoing investigation conspiracy theories. And I asked him to explain what he could about what was a conspiracy theory, and it was very, very difficult for him to do that.
Joe, though, listening to all of this, and we talked about this in depth last week when this all came out, here's the thing. Most people feel like, you know what, if you're some poor schlub who's enlisted and you take a picture on a submarine and you send it to your mother, you're going to lose everything. You're going to jail. You're going to be found guilty. You will be tried, the whole bit, and then you're going to lose your career, everything, and it's going to take the president to pardon you to get you out of it. But compare that to what James Comey and Hillary Clinton did, and people just find the entire thing unfair. And this idea that, well, because in Washington, D.C., where it would have to be tried, no one's going to find these people guilty, just doesn't seem to be the way our justice system should work.
Well, I don't think they're not going to bring cases just because it's in the District of Columbia. I think that's one element that you consider when you have totally Democratic jurors who are very anti-Trump, very anti-Republican. Just look at the Scooter Libby case and the post-verdict discussions with the jurors. Those were a disgrace to the judicial system, and the judge in that case should have set aside the Libby verdict based on those interviews. That said, just remember something. Comey lost his job. He's been disgraced publicly. The fact that many people in the media at the Times and the Post eulogize him and think he's great and he's the second coming of Christ. With the American people, he is a total loser. Now, it is true that thus far he has escaped prison. I think, everything takes time. This is the single greatest scandal in the history of our country. It's taking time to evolve. Barr's done a fabulous job of getting to the point, reestablishing control of the department, the integrity of the department. But not everybody is going to go to jail who should go to jail. And it is true. I mean, at this point, until we get a better accounting, there appears to be two systems of justice, one for Democrats, one for Republicans, one for highfalutin people, one for lowfalutin people. And that's why how this all ends up is very important. And so I'm in a wait and see mode. The system is not going to go away. We're still going to have to live with it, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to hold people like this accountable. Yep. We're in the process of doing that. This is very, very hard work in a democracy.
Meanwhile, a bombshell dropped in the case against General Michael Flynn on Friday that could change everything. Joe DiGenova's reaction to that in just a moment.
We're here with Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, something very, very interesting happened on Saturday. Attorney Sidney Powell, who is representing Michael Flynn, former national security advisor, accused the prosecutors in a lawsuit filed against Flynn of hiding exculpatory evidence, and was very smart in how she did this. She actually used a case as an example of the prior behavior like this that was tried in front of the same judge who was trying the Michael Flynn case, Judge Emmett Sullivan. Can you tell us about what she's done here and what you think the outcome of this is going to be? Was this a smart move on her part?
Well, she's a new lawyer, replacing the Covington and Burling lawyers who apparently charged General Flynn between $4 and $6 million to plead guilty. I don't know what Covington and Burlington did. Wow. Covington and Burling did for $6 million, but whatever it wasn't worth what he was forced to pay. The disgraceful commentary on the legal profession. She took over. She basically wants what are called Brady materials, which are exculpatory materials which the government failed to turn over, she alleges, during plea negotiations. And, of course, you are entitled to exculpatory material during sentencing as well. The Supreme Court has ruled that that's part of your Fifth Amendment due process rights. And the government says there is nothing. Why you would believe the government today, after everything we've gone through in that case and every other case, is beyond me. It's clear General Flynn never should have been prosecuted. It's clear that George Papadopoulos never should have been prosecuted, that Carter Page never should have been spied upon. So the issue for Sidney Powell is to get enough information to have the judge throw out the conviction. She's not interested in a better sentencing. She wants the case thrown out for due process violations for the government's failure to disclose information that would show that the general wasn't guilty. For example, General Flynn has never received the original notes of his interview at the White House, where this alleged false statement that he pleaded guilty to occurred. Of course, we know that he didn't make a false statement to the FBI because the Bureau already had the transcript of his conversation with Russian Ambassador Kislyak, because Kislyak was the subject of a FISA tap. And in fact, we now learned as a result of her pleadings that General Flynn told them in the interview when they started asking him about Kislyak, you know what I said and he said, because it was in the transcript of the FISA. We know that Flynn told the agents that.
This idea of going to the judge, Emmett Sullivan, and saying, hey, the prosecution's not giving us evidence that's exculpatory, they are likely to find a sympathetic ear from Emmett Sullivan because he has a reputation of being very tough on prosecutors to ensure that they do their job the right way. Is that right?
Yeah, he does have a general, he got it from one case, the Ted Stevens case, where he ripped into the prosecutors, and rightfully so. But he's also done something pretty stupid in this case. He erroneously accused General Flynn of treason during a status hearing, and had to come out later after a break and apologize for having done so. I would say at this point that based on what I've seen, that Emmett Sullivan has an animus toward General Flynn, which I think is unseemly for a federal judge in cases like this. That blow-up in the last status hearing or two status hearings ago was an embarrassment to the federal judiciary. And I can't imagine that he didn't hear about it when he took a break and went back in chambers and either another judge or somebody said, for God's sakes, Emmett, what are you talking about? You accused the guy of treason. He's not charged with that. And there's no evidence he did anything. I have no confidence that Emmett Sullivan will do the right thing. I have found his performance in this case up to this point unimaginably just ununderstandable. I mean, when he accused Flynn of treason, what's fascinating to me is that the night before on Rachel Maddow, she gave a litany of the things that Flynn was guilty of. And the next day in court, Judge Sullivan repeated almost verbatim everything that Rachel Maddow said on her show.
Wow.
That scared the living crap out of me when I heard that, and I knew what had occurred. So what he's going to do, I have no idea. I think this guy is beyond quixotic.
Well, what's interesting though is she's trying to get the prosecutor's lawyers for the government there. She's trying to get them taken off the case because she did present evidence that they withheld for almost 8 months the text messages between Strzok and Page.
Yes,
and
I don't have any doubt that she is absolutely correct that there has been gross government misconduct. Listen, Andrew Weissman ran these cases. That means that they have been unethical and unprofessional from the start. Weissman is a thug. He's gone from the government because he couldn't go back to the Justice Department after he was in Mueller's office. He just couldn't. It wouldn't have been possible. There would have been investigations into his conduct. And, of course, he left the department because once you leave Andrew Weissman, you can no longer be investigated by the Inspector General. So he did a very smart thing. He left. As far as the accusations against these are some of these prosecutors were involved in the original case against General Flynn. Some of them were not. It doesn't matter. The history of the government's conduct is reviewable by the judge, no matter who the lawyer for the government is standing in front of them. But I don't think there's any doubt there's been massive government misconduct in General Flynn's case. If the judge wanted to, he could easily set aside this conviction and throw it out. He also knows that Flynn is going to be pardoned. Let's not kid ourselves. At the end of this long, stupid legal road, which never should have occurred, General Flynn is going to be pardoned. It's either going to happen the day that Sullivan imposes an ungodly sentence of incarceration, even if it's for a week, he's going to be pardoned that day, or he's going to be pardoned at the end of the Trump administration. You know, I don't know this for a fact, but my instincts are that President Trump would never tolerate a conviction of General Flynn when he was clearly framed just like they tried to do with the president. Because remember, the Flynn framing was part of a plot to get the president. Now, I know there's a few reporters out there at the Times and the Post that don't think any such thing ever happened, but those idiots are not how we run our democracy. We do legal analysis, we look at what happened, and it's pretty clear Flynn is a victim of the attempt to get Trump.
All right.
All right. Joe DiGenova, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Will do. Happy Labor Day.
And thank you, Joe, for that.